Today we have so much to go over. Let's just get right to it. We're going to be talking about Trump's withdrawal from the Paris Climate Agreement, and we'll be talking about how this has to do also with the Bilderberg meeting that's meeting up this weekend and how they just so happen to be coinciding. That and more to come. Now, I'm here at the New York Times where it says President Trump announced yesterday that the United States would withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord, weakening efforts to what they call combat global warming and embracing isolationist voices in his White House, who argued that the agreement was a pernicious threat to the economy and American sovereignty. Now, if you can recall from last week, we also talked about how Trump met with Pope Francis in the Vatican and the G7 summit and the NATO summit and how that all coincided together too. And we talked about how they were pushing for this climate deal and for Mr. Trump to go along and back it. But now that he did not, we're going to talk about the bigger implications behind that too, because the report goes on to say in a speech from the Rose Garden, Trump said that the landmark 2015 pact imposed wildly unfair environmental standards on American businesses and workers, which it does, not just for Americans, but for the entire world, and will be exposing the Paris climate deal once again. He vowed to stand with the people of the U.S. against what he called a, quote, draconian international deal, which it is indeed. He says, quote, I was elected to represent the citizens of Pittsburgh, not Paris, the president said, drawing support from members of his Republican Party, but widespread condemnation from political leaders, business executives, and environmentalists around the plane. Mr. Trump's decision to abandon the agreement for environmental action signed by 195 nations is a remarkable rebuke to heads of state, climate activists, corporate executives, and members of the president's own staff who all failed to change his mind with an intense last-minute lobbying blitz. The Paris Agreement was intended to bind the world community into battling rising temperatures in concert, and the departure of the world's second-largest polluter is a major blow. Now, of course, with all of these world leaders backing climate change and backing the Paris deal and all of the world coming together for this, you know that there is an agenda in mind, and we're going to be going over that agenda once again of what? Operation Depopulation. But even though Trump backed out of it, you're going to see how they're pushing for what? World War Indeed, and that's all that they're pushing for, problem, reaction, solution, because they've planned all of this ahead of time. Yes, Mr. Trump is a puppet for the Illuminati and the Zionists, just like all of the other ones, and he's playing his role indeed with the response of the elite indeed. Now, this comes from Capital Research, and it says that if the Paris Treaty was followed, it would lose over 6.5 million industrial sector jobs, raise household electricity prices by 13 to 20%, cost the economy $2.5 trillion by 2035, and destroy the coal industry, draining 1/3 of the energy's output. Now, the Daily Mail also speaks poorly about the Paris Accord when it talks about the undermining of U.S. competitiveness and jobs, and according to a study by NERA Consulting, meeting the Obama administration's requirements in the Paris Accord will cost the U.S. economy nearly $3 trillion over the next several decades. Okay, but they could just print out money anytime they want to. Debt is also a hoax too, just like climate change, there really is no debt. It also reports that this deal would also cut and lose jobs, and that it also decapitates the coal industry, and it imposes unrealistic targets on the U.S. for reducing carbon emissions while giving countries like China a free pass for the years to come. Now, you're probably thinking that it's a great thing that the U.S. pulled out from the Paris Accord because this means more job creations and that Trump is really trying to do a great thing and make America great again. But now that Trump has decided to pull out of the agreement, criticism is coming fast and furious from top leaders all over the plane, and that's exactly what they want, because before he even sat down, his predecessor, Mr. Obama, launched an all-out assault saying that Trump, quote, joins a small handful of nations that reject the future. The leaders of France, Germany, and Italy said that the decision was, quote, regrettable and that the deal was, quote, non-negotiable. And then Elon Musk, the Tesla billionaire, said he was quitting advising the White House, tweeting, leaving Paris is not good for America or the world. What is this really trying to imply? Now here are more reactions from your so-called celebrities and your politicians, and you know when the world leaders at the world stage are all reacting to this, you know there is a bigger agenda in mind indeed, and one of them could be to try to what? Get rid of Trump and also start and spread war, and if other nations join in, this could be their perfect excuse to, in fact, push for war and go to war, and we even see that that's what they're subliminally hinting at in a Time magazine article, which we'll be going over later on too. But we see right here, Al Gore himself, the liar himself, even said that, quote, removing the U.S. from the Paris Agreement is a reckless and indefensible action because, yes, the world needs to take action on climate change indeed, don't they? And if you're wondering why I'm being so sarcastic when it comes to climate change, because I've gone over the bigger agenda and the UN Agenda 21, which we'll also talk about later, and how this is nothing more than what? Depopulation, carbon taxes, international worldwide taxes to enslave the people more and more, and to also call for their new world order and establish their one world government under the guises of old economic stability and old climate change and carbon emissions and greenhouse gases. Yes, that is the agenda and the propaganda that they're feeding us no longer. Senator Bernie Sanders also said, quote, what President Trump did today by withdrawing from the Paris Climate Accord is an international disgrace, unquote. And then George Takei said that Trump is having the U.S. pull out of the Paris Climate Accord. Too bad someone didn't tell his father that he should have pulled out too. Senator Tom Kaine said that Trump alienates allies, walks away from Paris Agreement, and sabotages healthcare. His presidency is all destruction and no accomplishment. Sounds like an agenda indeed. The governor of California, Jerry Brown, said that California will resist this misguided and insane course of action. Leonardo DiCaprio said that today our planet suffered. It's more important than ever to take action. There were also comments made from Tesla CEO Elon Musk, Goldman Sachs CEO, and the Sierra Club, and it's just interesting that Goldman Sachs had something to say about this because this same exact weekend there's the Bilderberg meeting going on and the Goldman Sachs Corporation just so happens to be there. What is really going on here? And according to billionaire investor and banker Tom Steyer, Trump's Paris exit is, quote, a traitorous act of war. Do you see how they're already pushing war? Not even within 24 hours, all of these world leaders are coming together and saying, oh, how treacherous this is, and oh, this is a bad thing, and oh, this is a bad thing for the environment. Oh my goodness, what are they really getting ready for? Now here is where you can also read Elon Musk's statement here at Twitter, but not only is this a push for war and an excuse to possibly go to war with all of these world leaders coming together and being against Trump and possibly using this as an excuse to remove him from office, but this could be another way to keep the people asleep to climate change and the hoax thereof, and also part of the agenda to make the sleeping people think that Trump is really for America and that he's really helping America to make America great again and helping create jobs when this is far from the case. Because last I checked, Trump and all those other elite Zionists at the very top, they could care less about people like you and me, and that is just the darn truth. That is why they meet up behind closed doors to talk about more ways that they want to try to enslave us and keep the sleeping people asleep, because they know people are waking up to their agendas. They know people are waking up to the truth about climate change and the hoaxes and how it's all a scam and a sham for what? World domination and world control. And we'll be talking more about that later too. But now I'm here at Time magazine, and this article talks more about what would happen, at least according to them, if Trump were to withdraw from the deal, which he actually did. And I thought it was interesting and suspicious indeed how it mentions the relationship with China and Europe, and it says, Trump's move to leave the Paris Agreement is perhaps the biggest snub he could deliver to America's European allies, short of leaving NATO. Now, a lot of this we covered from last week at the G7 summit in NATO, and of course with the Pope, how they were all pushing him to stay and not to leave the Paris Climate Agreement. But now that he did, we see the bigger implications. But then it says, looking ahead, lack of agreement on climate change more broadly will complicate relations with other nations. What do they know? What are they trying to do? What are they trying to push? They're trying to give us the illusion of war, the illusion that America is against Europe and China, the illusion of all of these things to really push these things, and of course to push world war and to further the tensions. Because what do the Zionists do at the very top? What do the Illuminati bankers at the top do? They fund both sides of the war. Just ask Mr. Gerald Ford and he'll tell you all about how he funded World War I. Ask the Bush family and they'll tell you all about how they funded World War II. Are they funding this too, along with 9/11 and all the other ones? Now, this is another thing I thought was very interesting and suspicious indeed too, is where it says Nicaragua and Syria are the only other countries that do not support the Paris Agreement, and both do so for entirely different reasons. So we see that Syria also pulled out from the Paris Agreement. Will Trump stage actions, because yes, this is a stage, the world is a stage, will this also be compared to that of Syria and the mainstream media and how they like to demonize Syria? Are they going to try to pull the same thing with Trump? Will other nations join? What will this really lead up to? It's all an illusion indeed, and the Illuminati puppets at the very top are trying to distract and distort and keep us diverted from who's really behind this and what they're really doing. Now, this is the actual document of the Paris Agreement that was adopted at the UN Climate Change Conference as of December 2015. It was signed in New York as of 4/22/2016 and implemented last November, so only within a year it was actually implemented and, of course, signed by 195 countries. Now, I'm not going to go over all of this. It's only about 25 pages or so. I'll be sure to link it in the description box below so you can see it at your own time. Now, I've gone over this before in the past and talked about how this has to do with the new world order, the one world government. It also relates to Agenda 21 of depopulation, bringing all of these nations together and combating a threat when there really is none, in order to use that as an excuse to do what? To create order out of chaos, because if you're breathing in too much air, well, they're going to have to tax you for that. They're going to have to tax you for breathing out too much CO2, according to them. They're going to have to tax you for every other single thing, just like they have taxes for food and water and gas and everything else. Even though it's unconstitutional to even be paying taxes, let alone the Federal Reserve and the IRS, all of that is unconstitutional. It's all slavery all over again. And this is only more proof of that. Now, what I found interesting in this article was here at Article 7, where it says number 6 towards the bottom of page 9, where it says that parties recognize the importance of support and for international cooperation on adaptation efforts, and the importance of taking into account the needs of the developing country parties, especially those that are particularly vulnerable to the adverse effects of climate change. Now, here's a document that talks more about the climate change agenda and what it's really all about. And it says the Rockefeller Way, the family's covert climate change plan, and it comes from the Energy and Environmental Legal Institute. Now, of course, this has to do with the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds and all of the elite who are at the very top pushing and promoting these things, just like at the Bilderberg meeting that's taking place even as we speak. But this says here how they promote Agenda 21 at page 12, that it says, since its origin in 1992, the Rockefeller family has been a substantial benefactor, supporter, and advocate for UN Agenda 21, which we know has to do with depopulation. And by the way, this document is about 26 pages long, so not that long. I'll be sure to link it in the description box. But it says UN Agenda 21 is an initiative implemented by the United Nations as, quote, a comprehensive plan of action to be taken globally, nationally, and locally by organizations of the United Nations systems, governments, and major groups in every area in which human impacts on the environment. The agenda promotes smart growth by creating financial incentives for citizens to leave rural areas for big cities in the name of, quote, saving the planet. And that's exactly what they're doing. That's exactly what they're trying to do, is they want people to gather into cities for what? Control and depopulation. Because if everybody is in a city and no one is in rural areas, well, then guess what? They have surveillance and control of everyone. They can monitor your every move, and it's easier to control people that way. And that's exactly what Kirk McDonald lamented when he said, quote, like radical philanthropist George Soros, who's also one of the elitists who was doing all of these things, who was responsible for Black Lives Matter and many of the riots and protesting, pushing the martial law agenda too. The Rockefeller Foundation enthusiastically backs Agenda 21, a UN-sponsored plan that aims to expand government control over virtually every aspect of rural Americans' lives and for the entire world, not just America. And then it goes on to talk about Mr. Obama and how the Rockefellers have invested millions of dollars into these projects and developments. And it says, through their millions in donations to green activists, as well as their aggressive advocacy of major climate treaties and organizations, such as the Kyoto Protocol. And we went over this and talked about this and how this was adopted in 1997. The UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, or the UNFCCC, which is the document that comes for the Paris Agreement, and the UN Agenda 21, the Rockefeller family has been and continues to be the largest promoter and benefactor for the green movement, a movement they have used as a means to what? Expand their empire for over the past 3 decades. And that's exactly what they're doing. And is it a surprise or a coincidence that during the exact same time of this, the Bilderberg meeting is the exact same weekend? Oh, no surprise there whatsoever. It says that the 65th Bilderberg meeting will take place this weekend in Chantilly, Virginia, USA. And in fact, 131 participants from 21 countries have been confirmed for their attendance. And these are the topics that they will be talking about. And of course, it's what? Number 13. But it says the first one is what? The Trump administration, a progress report. Wow, how very timely indeed. And of course, the transatlantic relations, the Transatlantic Defense Alliance, bullets, bytes, and bucks, and also the transatlantic and all those trading has to really do with what? Censorship and censoring the internet, which is also what they're talking about too. The direction of the EU is what they'll also be focusing on, which has to do with what? Socialism and more control. But also it says too, can globalization be slowed down? Not for them. But then number 6 also talks about jobs, income, and unrealized expectations. Since when were they interested in jobs whatsoever? Now I thought this one was interesting, where it says the war on information. Sounds like what? Fake news and trying to censor the truth, like this channel, like they've been attempting to do for the past how many months, because they know more and more people are waking up to their scams and schemes indeed. And then they happen to mention too populism, which I find interesting. And this is a political movement wherein common people are exploited by the elite, and we see that going on all the time. Then they're also going to be talking about Russia and the international order, possibly spreading world war, the Near East, nuclear proliferation, China, and current events. But of course, they'll never tell us what they're really talking about and what they're really doing there, because they keep things behind closed doors, talking about how they want to enslave us more and more and reporting to those who's really above them. And I'm just going to say that we wrestle not against flesh and blood. And they'll probably also be talking about the alien invasion and the alien deception, because yes, this is something that we should be concerned about indeed. Now, here's the actual meeting and the list of the participants who's going to be here. Now, many of the elite that are listed here are chairs and CEO of banks and other organizations and institutions like colleges, but what you're also going to see is there are many others who are here too. For example, We have the chairman of the supervisory board of Deutsche Bank who's going to be here. We also have a senior visiting fellow at Wellesley College. There's also the chairman of the Goldman Sachs group that's going to be here too, which we just talked about. And this organization is also part of the Illuminati with the bankers at the very top and the Zionists at the very top. There's also the chairman of Bayer who's going to be here. And notice how the senior advisor of Kissinger Associates is also going to be here with none other than Mr. Kissinger himself, the same man who constantly talks about that the world needs to be depopulated, that there's too many people on the plane according to them, and that the world needs to be depopulated. And you can even look at some of their quotes, because yes, these things have come out of their mouths indeed. But also representatives from the Secretary of Defense are going to be there, and even the CIA, they're going to be there too. The Director General of CERN, Fabiola Giannotti, will be there also. Yes, we should be concerned indeed. If we scroll down to the K's and the L's, you'll also see that the editors of certain magazines and newspapers will be there that are Zionist funded too, and alphabet soups like Bloomberg, The Economist. There's also the Wall Street Journal that will be there too right here. The president and CEO of the Royal Bank of Canada will be there. If we go back up to K, we even see here Mr. Kissinger himself, the man behind what? Operation Depopulation. The former Homeland Security Officer Lisa Monaco is also scheduled to be in attendance, and then none other than NATO too, with Jens Stoltenberg too, who is the Secretary General of NATO. And I find it so interesting and very perfect timing indeed that they just had a NATO summit last week, and he's supposed to be here too, and also the National Security Council too. Oh my goodness, what are they really going to be talking about? Please seek Yahuwah and his true son Yahusha, because as you see, there's a lot going on, a lot to be talked about, and a lot will be talked about. And the plans for the New World Order and the One World Government are no longer coming, they are already here. But with Yahuwah and Yahusha, we do not have to fear. But this is Truth Unveiled here, keeping you updated as always, and saying as always, Shalom.